The letter arrived on a damp Tuesday morning, its parchment yellowed and edges frayed, bearing an unfamiliar wax seal. Inside, a message in elegant handwriting invited me to stay at the Whitmore estate, citing a distant familial connection. The offer was peculiar, yet the promise of a fresh start was tempting. Upon arrival, the mansion loomed with an imposing presence, its Gothic architecture casting elongated shadows under the overcast sky. The butler, Mr. Grayson, greeted me with a curt nod and handed me a list titled Household Rules. The directives were bizarre. Do not enter the east wing after dusk, always knock thrice before opening any door, and never acknowledge the whispers. As I crossed the threshold, a chill ran down my spine. The air was thick with secrets, and the walls seemed to breathe. I sensed that adhering to these rules was not just about etiquette, it was about survival. The horse-drawn carriage rumbled to a halt in front of the Whitmore mansion just past 5 o'clock in the evening. The driver, a hunched old man with a waxed gray beard and a fixed grimace, opened the door without saying a word. His eyes avoided mine as I stepped down onto the gravel, suitcase in hand. The estate was vast, an old Victorian structure with twin spires, ivy crawling up its sides like veins, and windows so dark they seemed painted black. The sky overhead had begun to bruise with the colors of early twilight, casting everything in a solemn hue. The large front door creaked open as I approached, revealing a man who looked as though he had been carved out of wax. Tall, stiff-backed, and dressed in a charcoal gray uniform, the butler bowed slightly. "You must be Mr. Callahan," he said. "I am Mr. Grayson, the caretaker of the estate. The Whitmores are expecting you." Before I could speak, he turned and led me inside. The air was colder the moment I stepped through the threshold. I heard the click of the door closing behind me, and a faint, metallic clang that echoed through the high ceilings of the foyer. The mansion's interior was more ornate than I had expected: oil paintings, stained glass windows, elaborate chandeliers, but everything was layered with dust and time. It felt like a museum that had not seen life in decades. Without speaking further, Mr. Grayson handed me a folded parchment. The ink was dark and sharp, the letters pressed into the paper as if carved. Rules for staying at Whitmore Estate. 1. Always be inside your room by 9 o'clock in the evening. 2. Do not speak to the maid in the red dress. 3. If you hear someone knocking from inside the walls, ignore it. 4. Never go near the greenhouse after midnight. 5. If the chandelier in the main hall begins to sway, do not look up. I stared at the list, waiting for some explanation. None came. "These are not jokes," Mr. Grayson said flatly. "Mr. Whitmore insists all guests follow them without question." "I understand," I said, though I did not. My voice sounded smaller than I expected. "Dinner will be served at 7 o'clock sharp," he said. "Miss Evelyn will greet you then. Until that time, you are welcome to rest or explore, so long as you avoid the east wing." With that, he turned and disappeared down a dim hallway, his footsteps muffled by the thick carpet. I stood there, feeling the weight of the rules in my hand. No matter how absurd they seemed, something deep in my chest told me to take them seriously. I was shown to my room by a silent housemaid who had not introduced herself. The room was large, but not comfortable: tall ceilings, a massive wardrobe that smelled faintly of mothballs, and a bed with wooden posts that scraped the ceiling. The only warmth came from a fireplace already burning, though I had not seen anyone light it. At precisely 7 o'clock, a soft chime rang through the mansion, followed by a quiet knock at my door. I opened it to find the same maid waiting for me. "Dinner is ready," she said, her voice so soft it was almost a whisper. I followed her to the dining room, a cavernous space dominated by a single oak table nearly 30 feet long. At the head of the table sat an elderly man with hollow cheeks and thinning white hair, his posture rigid and his hands folded. He rose as I entered. "Welcome, Daniel," he said. "I am Silas Whitmore, your host and, as I am told, your third cousin twice removed. A blood link, however distant, is never something we disregard in this family." I nodded, unsure of what to say. "Thank you for having me." To his left sat a woman with dark eyes and a long neck. She stared at me in a way that made my skin prickle. "This is my daughter, Evelyn," Silas said. "I hope you find our home interesting," she said with a smirk. Her voice carried a hint of something unplaceable, amusement, or maybe warning. As I sat down, 2 other family members entered. One was a boy no older than 14, who walked with a limp and kept his eyes glued to the floor. The other was a man in his 40s with graying sideburns and a jaw that seemed locked in place. Neither of them spoke. The dinner began quietly. The food was rich but odd: overcooked pheasant, blackened asparagus, and wine that tasted faintly of rust. Conversation was minimal. No one mentioned the rules, but they all seemed to be operating under some unspoken agreement. As the grandfather clock in the hall chimed 8 o'clock, everyone rose. Silas nodded at me. "Remember to be in your room before 9, he said. "And lock your door. Not all doors here open only from one side." I returned to my room with a strange urgency. Though the hallways were quiet, they no longer felt empty. I could not explain it, but I had the sensation of being watched from behind every curtain and painting. I locked the door and sat on the bed, the list of rules in my hand. I read them again. Then I read them a 3rd time. 9 o'clock drew near. At exactly 8:58, I heard the sound of soft footsteps outside my room. A shadow passed under the door. Then a knock. I froze. 3 slow knocks. I waited, holding my breath. "Daniel?" A woman's voice whispered from the other side. I recognized the voice. It was Evelyn's. "Daniel, let me in." My skin turned cold. The clock struck 9 o'clock. I did not move. She knocked again, more urgently this time. "Daniel, open the door." But the voice had changed. It was no longer smooth and calm. It was deeper, hungrier. I backed away from the door. After a few moments, the knocking stopped. When I woke the next morning, there were deep scratch marks on the outside of the door. The morning sun filtered through thick, yellowed curtains. I sat up in bed, uneasy and alert. Despite the silence of the room, the image of the scratches on the door was carved into my memory. I rose and unlocked the door cautiously, peering into the hallway. Empty. As I stepped into the corridor, I noticed something new: a trail of red, almost rust-colored drops, leading toward the west end of the house. I followed the pattern cautiously, expecting to find a broken pipe or perhaps some spilled wine. But at the end of the trail was a door I had not noticed before. Its handle was brass, tarnished and warm to the touch. On it was engraved a number I did not recognize: 117. None of the rooms I had passed bore numbers. I reached for the handle. "Do not open that door," a voice said from behind me. I turned quickly to find the boy from dinner, still limping, still refusing to make eye contact. "Why not?" I asked. He shook his head. "You are not ready for that one." "What does that mean?" He glanced up briefly. "It is for later. Maybe." Then he turned and walked away, his uneven steps echoing down the hallway. When I returned to my room, I discovered something else that had changed. Pinned to my pillow was a note. The ink was black and wet, the writing the same sharp, carved script from the rules. "Tonight you must visit the greenhouse. Bring no light. Bring no metal. Do not speak while inside." Below the message was the unmistakable emblem of the Whitmore seal. Night came quickly. At 7 o'clock, the family once again gathered for dinner. This time, only Silas, Evelyn, and the silent man with gray sideburns were present. The boy and the maid were absent, and their chairs were left untouched. "Do you enjoy the grounds?" Silas asked, his tone polite but cold. "They are interesting," I replied carefully. Evelyn smiled. "You should visit the greenhouse. It is beautiful at night." The look she gave me confirmed what I had feared. They knew about the note. They expected me to go. By 8:30, I stood alone at the back exit of the mansion, the path to the greenhouse laid out before me in white stones, glowing faintly under the moonlight. I had removed all metal: my belt buckle, the buttons from my coat, even the key to my room. As instructed, I carried no lantern. Only the moon guided me. The greenhouse was ancient. Its iron framework was twisted, and thick vines curled along the glass panels, obscuring the inside. I pushed open the door gently, and a warm, earthy scent rolled out, a smell not of flowers, but of damp soil and decay. Inside, it was humid and strangely loud. Leaves rustled, though there was no wind. Flowers opened and closed as though breathing. I moved forward slowly, careful not to touch anything. Then, in the center of the greenhouse, I saw it. A large wooden altar covered in moss and vines. On top lay something wrapped in burlap. I approached, heart pounding. The burlap twitched. I stepped back quickly. From behind me, a vine uncoiled and wrapped around my ankle. I fell hard against the dirt floor, my breath knocked out of me. The burlap began to unravel itself, revealing something pale and human-shaped. I wanted to scream, but the rule was clear: do not speak. The figure sat up. Its face was familiar. It was me. It opened its mouth and spoke without sound. Then, slowly, it lay back down and re-wrapped itself in the burlap. The vine released my ankle. I fled the greenhouse without looking back. The next morning, the house was silent. I saw no one. Not the maid, not the boy, not even Mr. Grayson. Breakfast had not been laid out. The mansion felt abandoned. Wandering down an unfamiliar hallway, I came upon a door slightly ajar. Inside was a long room lined with portraits, each depicting various members of the Whitmore family. The faces bore the same cold, intelligent eyes. The style of the paintings suggested centuries of lineage. One painting caught my attention. It was of a young man, perhaps 20 years old, standing in front of the very same greenhouse I had entered last night. He looked exactly like me. I leaned in to examine the plaque beneath it. Nathaniel Whitmore. Deceased, 1879. Footsteps approached behind me. I turned to see Evelyn standing there, arms crossed. "You have seen it," she said. "What is this?" I asked. "The house remembers. Sometimes it repeats." "What does that mean?" Evelyn stepped closer, her expression unreadable. "Every generation one is called. A blood relative. They come here under the guise of invitation. The rules are there to keep the house satisfied, but someone always has to be chosen." "For what?" She leaned close, whispering into my ear. "To stay." I could not sleep that night. The image of the man in the portrait haunted me. The idea that the house might consume people, might hold them, might be repeating some ritual, it was unbearable. At precisely 2 o'clock in the morning, I heard a soft knock on my door. Then another. Then 3. I stood, frozen. Then, against my better judgment, I unlocked the door. The hallway was empty. But down the hall, the door to the east wing was open. Lit by a single candle, the hallway beyond it was narrow and lined with mirrors. The air smelled of formaldehyde. I stepped inside. The floor creaked with each step. The mirrors reflected me, but not as I was. Each reflection showed me older, more broken, more decayed. At the end of the hallway was a single chair. In it sat the boy. But now, he looked much older. "Is it time?" he asked. "I do not know," I said. He stood slowly. "Then it is your choice." I blinked. When I opened my eyes, the hallway was gone. I stood in front of the mansion's main doors, and dawn light spilled in from outside. I could not sleep that night. The image of the man in the portrait haunted me. The idea that the house might consume people, might hold them, might be repeating some ritual, it was unbearable. At precisely 2 o'clock in the morning, I heard a soft knock on my door. Then another. Then 3. I stood, frozen. Then, against my better judgment, I unlocked the door. The hallway was empty. But down the hall, the door to the east wing was open. Lit by a single candle, the hallway beyond it was narrow and lined with mirrors. The air smelled of formaldehyde. I stepped inside. The floor creaked with each step. The mirrors reflected me, but not as I was. Each reflection showed me older, more broken, more decayed. At the end of the hallway was a single chair. In it sat the boy. But now, he looked much older. "Is it time?" he asked. "I do not know," I said. He stood slowly. "Then it is your choice." I blinked. When I opened my eyes, the hallway was gone. I stood in front of the mansion's main doors, and dawn light spilled in from outside. Breakfast was waiting for me. The table was set. Silas and Evelyn sat silently as I entered. No one spoke until I sat down. "Have you made your choice?" Silas asked. I want to leave, I said firmly. Silas nodded, solemn. Then you must follow one last rule. He slid a card toward me. It was blank, save for a single sentence. If you wish to leave, someone must take your place. I looked at him, at Evelyn. I looked down at the card again. I do not want to trap anyone else, I said. Evelyn smiled faintly. That is the correct answer. There was a knock at the door. Mr. Grayson entered, holding a new letter. Shall I send the next invitation? He asked. Silas raised his hand. No, not yet. He turned to me. You broke none of the rules. You refused to doom another. For now, the house is satisfied. The doors opened behind me. Sunlight poured in. I stepped outside, and the cold, heavy presence of the mansion lifted from my shoulders. I never returned. But sometimes, when the wind is strong enough, I hear knocking on my wall at night. And I do not answer. The first morning outside the mansion's heavy doors felt almost unreal. The crisp air filled my lungs with a kind of freedom I had not known in days, but my mind remained shackled by everything I had seen and felt inside. I made my way down the gravel path toward the road, every step away from the estate an attempt to escape the oppressive weight it had laid upon me. Yet, even in the bright daylight, the memories clung like fog. I stopped by the edge of the forest bordering the property. A chill ran down my spine as the wind whispered faintly through the trees, a sound almost like voices calling my name. Back in the town, my story met disbelief. The locals regarded me with a mix of pity and skepticism. Police dismissed the mansion as abandoned, no longer a place for anyone to stay. No records existed for the Whitmore family. But I knew. The rules were real. The voices were real. The mansion had not let me go. That night, in a cheap motel room miles away, the knocking began. At first, soft, like the gentle tap of a polite visitor. Then, sharp and frantic, like a warning. When I did not answer, the knocking faded, replaced by a whispering that seeped into my dreams, drawing me back. Despite my resolve to leave the past behind, sleep evaded me. Each night, the knocking grew louder. Each night, the whispers grew clearer. I found myself tracing the rules again, scrawled on torn scraps of paper I had salvaged from the mansion. Their meaning deepened with every reading, as though they were alive, shifting with a will of their own. One rule haunted me most. If you hear the knocking, you must not open the door, or the house will come for you. The next knock came just as I had settled into an uneasy sleep. At precisely 11:30 p.m., the sound echoed from my motel room door. Cold sweat broke across my forehead as the knock reverberated through the thin walls. I sat motionless, heart pounding, refusing to open. The knocks slowed, then stopped. The whispering crept in, softer now, almost pleading. I understood, then, the mansion was not done with me. It had marked me. Days turned into weeks. My life fractured under the weight of paranoia. My phone rang with no one on the other end. Shadows appeared at the corner of my eyes. Doors creaked in empty houses. I knew the mansion had followed me. In desperation, I returned to my notes, piecing together what I could. The Whitmore mansion was more than a house. It was a living entity. Bound by ancient pacts and cursed bloodlines, it consumed those who lived under its roof, feeding on fear and broken wills. The rules were survival mechanisms, but they also bound the soul tighter. Breaking them risked death. Following them guaranteed a slow, inescapable trap. One evening, as storm clouds gathered, I returned to the mansion. The gates stood open, creaking in the wind. Inside, the house pulsed with a cold, blue light. The chandelier in the main hall swung gently despite the still air. I remembered the rule. If the chandelier sways, do not look up. Against every instinct, I lifted my eyes. Above, a mass of shadows writhed, twisting into faces and hands. A voice whispered in my ear, chilling and familiar. Welcome back. The walls around me shifted, revealing portraits of past victims. People who had dared to defy the mansion's will. I realized then, I was part of the house now, and the rules were the only chain between me and madness. In the heart of the mansion, I found Evelyn standing beside the altar in the greenhouse. You cannot leave, she said calmly. but you can join." Her eyes glowed faintly in the dark. "You broke none of the rules, but the house demands a price." I reached into my pocket and found the blank card from the final rule. She smiled. "Sign it, and your soul will bind to the estate forever. Refuse, and you will wander until you lose yourself." I hesitated, feeling the cold breath of the house on my neck. Then I understood. The mansion needed me, just as it had needed Nathaniel before me. I took the pen from her hand. Somewhere, far from the mansion, I received a letter. A wax seal bearing the Whitmore crest. A single sentence inscribed inside. "The house remembers you. Come home." I folded the letter slowly. The rules had become my life, my prison. And now, it was time to send the invitation.